Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 36 Project. And in this podcast, we talk about art, culture, politics, sport, and anything else worth talking about. Now, if you like this latest episode, please like, share, and comment below. Now, today's guest, I first discovered her on her channel on YouTube a few months ago and thought actually she was very good. And then I've seen her on live streams since then, giving her very erudite opinions on the film and TV industry. So I decided to invite her for an interview, and I'm happy to say that she accepted my invitation. Her name is Erin Underwood, and she says speaks to me now. Hello, Erin.
Hey Chris, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
I'm well. I'm extremely well. I'm glad to have you on the podcast. Before we get into the topics that we decided to discuss beforehand, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and why is it about film and TV that made you want to, well, first of all, made you love it, and second of all, made you decide to create your own YouTube channel?
Well, there are a couple parts to that answer. One, ever since I was a kid, I've been writing stories, writing novels, writing short stories, screenplays, different things, just for fun on the side. It wasn't until maybe the last 10, 15 years that I kind of got more serious about that and started editing science fiction anthologies and running science fiction and fantasy conventions and really getting to be part of that kind of literary world. But honestly, my first love has always been movies. I love movies so much because that's a combination of like a visual and a narrative medium kind of pulled together in a perfect way. And so my day job is a little stressful. I work at a place called MIT Technology Review. It's a magazine for MIT focused on emerging technologies, and I run their events. Like I develop and design emerging technology events for C-suite leaders. And so just to like let my brain relax a little, I just watch movies. And I got to the point where I just wanted to talk to people about them. I didn't want to write reviews that just got sent out to a newspaper or sent out online and I never heard from anyone. I like to talk to people about these stories and why they matter. And so that's kind of why I started my YouTube channel because I realized here I am producing events and videos for other people. I could do this for myself and I could meet people like you that I can have these great conversations with. And so that's kind of what got me here.
So, is there any particular genres that you like, or are you just someone who likes all genres regardless?
Well, I think for movies, I pretty much like all genres. But for fiction, for writing, it's really science fiction, fantasy, and horror because I think there are really great lenses into society and looking at like those things that make us tick.
Okay, cool. So you say your main job is dealing with your work for a technology magazine, and you said
Yeah.
writing as well, with screenplays and whatnot. So seeing as you're a fan of science fiction,
Mhm.
does your day job give you ideas for screenplays? Does that feed into it?
Absolutely. I actually have a novel that I'm working on right now. It's a time travel novel, and
Okay.
I'd been working on it for, a good amount of time, and I realized I just ran into this giant plot hole. Like things weren't making sense, and I just couldn't solve some of those problems. And this is maybe like 8 years ago.
Mhm.
And then I started working at MIT Technology Review, and now it's been, I don't know, about 6 years since I've been there. And when you have to research AI and robotics and everything from quantum to energy, like just the gamut of technology that's out there, I realized about 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, like, oh my God, I think I know how to fix my plot holes now. I understand how to create plausible technology scenarios that could be realistic and could solve those problems in that novel. So I've actually started kind of tinkering with that again, and I think I might actually turn that into a screenplay because that's just where my love is right now. So we'll see how that turns out.
Fantastic, fantastic. We'll definitely look forward to your novel. as well. And please keep us updated how that goes on. Um, Speaking of, you say you're passionate with screenplays, and obviously one of the things with movies at the moment is there's a lot of, for want of a better word, almost depression about the movie industry. And I'll say the Hollywood movie industry, and I'll say that for a reason which I'll explain later on. But in regards to movies and people saying, and I hate this word, but people talk about how woke they are and stuff like this, and you hear it all the time. I don't want to go into wokeness into movies because that's been done ad nauseum. But do you think, maybe it's just me, that because that we've been dealing with that for the best part of a decade, that actually what constitutes a good movie in society now is too low, like the bar's too low for it, i.e., in the sense of if it's anti-woke, oh, it must be good. And it's like, well, no, there needs to be more than that when it comes to a movie. Would you agree with that?
I actually would. I too I don't like the word woke. I find it to be completely useless to a degree when talking about art, because art is supposed to make you question, it's supposed to make you think, it's supposed to challenge you. And when you assign woke or anti-woke to any form of art, especially like a movie, it really does take away from the thing you're supposed to be focusing on, which is there a good plot? Are the characters well developed? Are the challenges they face realistic for the world or the position that they're in? Are the choices that they're making reasonable for who they are as people in the story? And you could make, and I'm convinced of this, you could make a really compelling story that is anti-woke, and you can make a really compelling story that's woke. And I think that putting political tags on things like that, it's just not helpful. I think if we want to repair whatever damage has been done to the film industry, we really need to focus on story, because that means you're focused on people and humans and the kinds of things people care about. And that's not little terms like woke or anti-woke.
Yeah, because sometimes I look at it and I think, well, okay, it may be work or whatever, but what are you going to do about it basically? Because it's saying something's woke, okay, but it actually hides to me some of the other problems that have happened with movies over the last decade. Some of them was actually, I think, are actually more pressing than woke as well. Like say that the screenwriter, the level of writing, even the level of cinematography, which in some ways has been good, but in some ways I think it's gone down a little bit, and CGI being a great example of that. And one way I think you could possibly solve this, and I've seen it with other people, be publishing their own books or doing their own comic, graphic novel company and whatnot, is moving away from the main Hollywood distributors, producers, and so on and so forth. Because of, and obviously I'm doing this now and it's going to go up on YouTube. So because of the technology we have now, do you think that that's actually something that's viable, where someone could actually, if they were good enough, could raise money to make an actual film? It might be for a few thousand, but it could be good enough to, kick up a fuss and so on and so forth with technology we have at the moment. Is that possible, or is it going to be subservient to the studios and the major distributors and publishers?
I think there's actually a couple different ways to answer that question. The first one, let me go to the technology side first. There are a lot of new technologies out there that are empowering small studios to create films that were never possible at a budget that they can afford. And the technology is getting better and better and better. So when you're dealing with things like AI and you need a generative background or you need an explosion, but you don't have, all of the money to support the effects team and the planning and the materials to actually blow something up, you can now design that explosion, for example, in programs like Runway or some of these other things that are out there. And that actually creates more of this level playing field for the small studios compared to those larger studios. the problem is that we're still in that learning phase, and a lot of the technology isn't so great. And if you don't use it sparingly and in wise ways, you can really tell the difference of, the digital backgrounds or the AI generated landscapes. And the worst thing is when you see actors on a green screen acting in a world where the objects aren't real, there's just something that the actors can't get around, like they can't fill that void, and the audience senses it. So I don't know when the technology will actually get to the point where that doesn't matter anymore, but I do believe there's a chance that we will eventually get there. And when we do, there will be a whole new world between storytellers in the small settings and storytellers in those big budget studios. And I think what the big budget studios are going to learn is that doesn't matter how much money you put into your project. If you don't have a good story and you're not using your technology well, it's not going to come out good. And the audience is going to pan your story 100%. So you really have to look at quality across the board, across the board. Um, so that's the technology side of things. But I also think that, and this might be jumping ahead just a little bit, I do think our writing skills for storytelling have not mm, held even over the years. And I think some of the writing is just not holding up. So I
Well,
always
this
feel
is
guilty saying that. I always feel so guilty.
no, don't be because it's something I feel. I was gonna, what was it, honest on this podcast to say what you think, but that was a point I was gonna get onto. So we're gonna get, well, I'll get onto it now. Why do you think that is with the writing? Because as a writer myself, and obviously we spoke briefly before we came on, and I said, well, I'm trying my own screenplays and whatnot, and I'm not saying I'm an amazing writer, and I'm always looking to improve. But it does, and I'm always someone who, if someone does well, I'm inspired by them, and I want to think, okay, how have I done that? Let's learn from that. But I do
Yeah.
get frustrated when see some of these writers who are, let's be honest, awful, awful. I'm being PC, but very awful. And not only are they awful, but then they're still given continuous opportunities to be awful. And you get that with some directors as well. And I'm just wondering why is still getting those opportunities? Because I watch a lot of independent film as well, and there's some really good stuff independently, like films, especially coming from America as well at the moment, low budget, real independent stuff. But some of those directors aren't given a lot of chances. Some of them are, but a lot of them aren't. But it's like, why is the writing so awful? Because I just don't get I don't get why it's so bad.
You know, I think it has a lot to do with who you know. And so I think that, especially in the Hollywood scene, it's all about the network. It's all about greasing each other's palms. It's about getting your script in front of someone, and you film my thing and I'll film your thing, and we'll green light this, but if we do this, then we need to do that. And everybody's got a pet project. But you're right. Like there are, like, I'll just use Madam Web for an example. That's a film that could have been amazing. That's a superhero film that could have delivered something really cool and different, because the hero um, wasn't your traditional kind of hero, and how she came to her powers wasn't a traditional trajectory. And she was watching out for these other heroes that were rising as well. Um, but what we got was just a mishmash of bad plot lines, characters that were never fully realized, um, conflicts that never paid off, and product placements right and left that they paid for. So lots of
Mhm.
product placements. And on top of it, just dialogue that didn't work. And if you listen to how people actually talk to each other in the wild, like on the street or in a coffee shop, they don't talk like a lot of these people talk in films, and it gets it gets to the point where you're just like, nobody would say that. Nobody would
Mm.
think that. And once you get to that point in a film, it breaks you out of that suspension of disbelief that you need to be in that world with those characters. And you're right. I don't know why these people keep getting jobs other than they start building a resume and they're able to like list all the things they worked on and the experience that they have and their contacts in the field. And that ends up being all that matters. So if you've got a great script, Chris, that you think is really good and people have read it and said, "Hey, these are great characters. This is a really interesting premise." It is so hard for you to get that script in front of someone who's a decision maker that will put money behind it, because nobody in Hollywood knows who Chris Akers is. And so they're less likely to want to take a chance on you than, or me, than the guy that has 5 films behind him, even if those films didn't do well.
Yeah, indeed. And it's interesting you talked about Madam Web because you can apply what you just said to its director. Because when I checked the director, I think it's a British director behind it, and she, as far as I'm aware, only directed TV episodes. I think she may have done 1 or 2 episodes of Game of Thrones and then a couple of others. And then she did a soap drama over here called Doctors over here, like just a few years before. And then you go from that to giving someone as a first film, a film which is, I think had an £80 million budget. I mean, that's a massive leap.
Massive.
Crazy. And I'm just thinking, like I said, with the indie scene, there are people who've done good horror, good sci-fi. Why not take a chance on someone like that who at least knows the setup of a movie and at least can be a little bit more creative with that? It's just
Yeah.
crazy. And actually, isn't that one of the other problems just coming to my mind is until about, say, 20 years ago, it's probably because of DVDs, you used to have a natural progression in the sense of you could have an indie film and then you'd have a film that was like 10, 20 million. And then from there, that's when you get onto the big budget. Now that 10, 20 million film is, you could learn craft is gone. It's not there anymore. So you would say that's a problem where you're jumping from complete novice to something big budget that's going to be seen by a lot of people.
Yeah, it's funny how I think a lot of that has to do with just the rise in costs of goods and how much it costs to produce things and build things and pay people for jobs. And the more well-known people are, the more they want to get paid for all the things that they do, unless they're like a really big star and it's a pet project and they're willing to take a small budget or a small paycheck. But uh I, you might appreciate this as a writer as well as someone who writes screenplays and loves movies, but in the fiction world, I think the true innovations in story and finding the freshest new stories, the new content, actually come in short stories, so short fiction. And short fiction isn't always something people enjoy, but short fiction is like a wonderful playground. It's like a sandbox that you can play in and you can blend genres, you can test out theories, you can try new types of characters. You can throw all kinds of things on the wall in that story world and just see how they work out. And a lot of times you can also invent new genres with, especially with social media and trying to figure out how to put social media into a written format. And it just gives you this place to play. And films don't really have that kind of runway anymore. When we had films that you could produce for that smaller amount of money, it did give you some wonderful opportunities for just engaging, interesting, innovative new films that you just hadn't seen before. But now everything is like 50, 60, $100 million. And once you get into those kinds of numbers, people get less and less willing to take a chance and they want sure bets on a return.
I think it was in the 1980s, Stephen King did this. I don't know if it was a contest, but he'd done this pledge whereby he'd written a number of short stories at that point. And he said
Mhm.
that any up and coming director who wants to direct them and wants to go to adapt them for film and wants to buy the rights to combine them for £1 and direct it. I think that's how like, the Shawshank Redemption got made, for instance. And I
Yep.
just wonder, I don't know, I mean, I'm not too au fait with the finances and whatnot, but I'm wondering if could film studios do something similar to that in the sense of we see certain people in directors and writers in the indie space. Okay, they could say to them, okay, here's 5 million or whatnot. It can be anything, but here's 5 million and that's your budget, and that's what you got to do with, and then see what they can do from there. Maybe I'm just being idealistic, but I don't understand why studios don't do that because at least then they'll be under the purview of that studio, and the studio could actually build them up as time goes on.
Well, I love that you're idealistic, and I think that I love your idea as well. I think that's a great idea for getting new film directors and new writers and new production assistants and new designers to try out new things in these spaces. And there actually is a really vibrant short film community out there where they're making these wonderful films that are creative and interesting and engaging. The problem is, and this isn't quite a fair thing to say, but not as many people, nobody sees these unless they go to film festivals and they intentionally seek these things out. And directors and production studios, they just put all their money into the known quantities, and you just don't get that same sense of excitement that you used to get. I think that I remember there was a time when you would go to like a big budget movie and there would be a short 1 to 5 to maybe 10-minute movie that they show right at the beginning of the film. And that's how I saw my first Pixar movie. It was just a really short film attached to another movie. And that's how I saw, like, what is this Pixar thing? Like, this is amazing. And it just goes to show you that every big studio was once a small studio. And somebody took a chance on Pixar, and Pixar grew into what it is now. And I know that's a real, it's like a kind of a dumbed down summary of that answer. But I do think that there are these things out there. It's just that
Yeah,
Hollywood doesn't look at them. I don't
yeah,
think. Not like they should anyway.
yeah. It's sad. It is very sad, and I think one of the problems is now movies are ridiculously expensive.
Oh my God. Yes.
So why is, I mean, I look at some budgets of some of the films. I think it was Katie Sackhoff that jokingly, and in TV as well, Katie Sackhoff jokingly said that when she was on The Mandalorian, the food budget was seemed to be the price of one episode of Battlestar Galactica, which was on nearly 20 years before. That's how bad the budget has become. Why has as a budget for films and TV become so bloated? Because it's getting basically you're getting more for less. You're paying more money for less quality, as far as I'm concerned. Why is that? What that is that money being spent on?
I think it's just inflation. I think a lot of it is everything from, God forbid I say tariffs, but tariffs, taxes, inflation, the cost of goods just being sold through supply chains, some countries doing better than other countries. It's just, I don't know how to get around it and I don't know how to solve it. And of course, things are more expensive today than they were, you know, 10 or 20 years ago. But I think even if prices were normalized and you did the math to kind of figure out what today's prices would be, 10 or 20 years ago, I think things are still more expensive today. And part of that is once you get a price increase, nobody ever lowers their price. So if you have fuel being more expensive, everybody raises their prices to account
Mm.
for it. And then when fuel becomes less expensive, they don't lower their prices. They keep the prices where they were. And then everybody's like, oh, wait, we're making lots of money now. And then all of a sudden fuel goes up again. So they raise their prices again. And it just keeps happening over and over. And I don't know how to solve that problem. That's a problem that's way beyond my economic economics brain. So, but you're right.
Isn't one of the problems regarding the wages some of the big actors are paid, especially now because, in my view, we have good actors, but we don't have movie stars. If you look at someone like whether people may think of someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger, his films at his peak, he was only like between 10 and 20 million a film, but that's because his name was such that his name alone would bring that in box office revenue. And I know you could talk about Tom Cruise and whatnot, but saying over the last 10, 15 years, there's no one that's come across who, yes, they may be famous, but he's not big enough that their name guarantees revenue. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think there are fewer and fewer of those people, and I think as films get crappier and crappier,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
if you're a big name person and you're in a string of really bad movies, your box office draw goes down. People start thinking about you in those last films that didn't do so well or didn't have a good character or a good plot. And they're like, I don't know that I really want to see another. I'm just gonna, so I like Pedro Pascal, but he's in everything right now, and I'm sick of him. Like, I like him, but I've seen too much of him. He
yeah.
needs to stop. They need to give him a break because even people who like him are like, give another guy a chance. There's got to be another actor out there that can do the job. But, when you start overexposing these actors, their value, I think, on screen goes way down. And I think that as you get these really big name actors, whether it's Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or Keanu Reeves or, whoever it might be, their names do sell the films, but unless those films are good, they're not going to stay at the top of the game. And honestly, I'm kind of done with seeing the same people in films over and over and over again. We need a new crew of actors and talented actors at that to kind of rise up.
Would you apply that as well to the types of films and certainly franchises that we have at the moment? Because I see a lot of YouTube videos that talk about the demise of Doctor Who or the demise of James Bond or Star Trek or Star Wars. And I understand it and I get it. But then there's a part of me that thinks, well, have been around since the 60s sometimes. There's a part of me is like, as much as I don't like what they did with them, that actually it might be a good thing because we need new things that are going to carry on for the next generation. Would that be, again, fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they basically plumb these franchises until there's nothing left. And they should be stopping and letting the franchise get some air and put some time between the films so that they can come up with fresh new ideas that are interesting. But instead, they just keep going back to the same well over and over again. And to give a farming metaphor, um, if you plant the same crop in the same field for 20, 30 years, however many years, the crop might still grow, but in diminishing returns, or maybe someday it just stops being healthy and it starts going bad. That's where we are with so many of these franchises. And I think Doctor Who's a really good example of that. Whether the writing is good or not at this point, I think the audience needs a break. They need to take a breath. They need a pause. They need to miss it. They need to miss that show. They need to miss the doctor for a little while and then come back to him. And that's the same for I just saw Jurassic Park. That franchise needs to take a big break and really think about what stories they should be telling because they keep telling the same stories over and over again. And you see that with like the Indiana Jones film that came out recently. You kind of see that with all the superhero movies that are coming out. People need a break. The writers need to take a break because it's just not producing a healthy environment for future films. And the audiences are going to stay at home. And that's the future they're building for themselves right now.
Yeah, indeed. You mentioned tariffs there, so we might as well get onto that topic. how how do you think it will affect like Hollywood, these tariffs this will go ahead, like in terms of the making of movies? Because I imagine one, just to think off the top of my head, one aspect of that could be in terms of locations. Because if you want to go abroad now, you're going to be charged with 100% tariff. So how would it affect it? Is that accurate enough, or have I got that wrong? Because I'm not an expert at tariff, so how would it affect like the film industry?
Well, honestly, I think the people who are experts on the tariffs are not the people that are being listened to right now. So, um, so the tariffs are very confusing. They're coming, they're going, they're changing, some people are getting a tariff, some people aren't, some industries are getting it, some industries aren't. There's little rhyme or reason. But if you look at movies and how production works and how much of what we do is digital, um, I honestly don't know how they're going to be able to survive tariffs because if you're looking at you want to bring um, films back to the United States, well, we don't have the production facilities right now to make the cameras, the lenses, the the sets, the machines, the whatever it might be. We can't produce all of the things that we would need to produce our manufacturing system. It just isn't at the level it would need to be to sustain just this one industry. Then think about all the other industries that are out there. And the result of that is you're going to have to pay really, really high prices to get the things you need from outside of the country. And if there is a manufacturer in the US that can make lenses, for instance, then they're like, huh, lenses, if they bring them in from outside the United States, costs this much. My lens costs this much. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to raise my price to be just under that international price so that I'm still cheaper. I'm making a lot more money. But you know what? It doesn't help the film industry in the United States because even US made stuff is going to be more expensive in addition to the international products that they're importing. And then if you think about the digital assets that are being created, how do you start mapping that out? And how do you know when a tariff should be applied and when a tariff shouldn't be applied? Should it be applied to the whole movie, parts of the movie? If you pay tariffs on all the things that you've used to create the movie, and then you have to pay tariff on the movie, it just it's a very confusing thing. And I know that the whole goal behind it is to, enhance or restore the Hollywood film industry, but there are better ways to do that than what is being done right now. I don't think it's going to help Hollywood.
One thought that just came into my head, and I'm just going to quickly go back to the writing is,
Hmm.
isn't one of the problems with writers is that a lot of writers now, and it's going to sound really weird, is that they go to film school and it's almost too structured in how the work. And the reason I say that is because if you look at someone like Oliver Stone, for instance, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he went to film school. But the one thing he did do as well, which a lot of young people, because I'm in my 40s, a lot of people haven't done, is he lived a life.
Right.
He lived a life. Yeah, he fought in Vietnam. He did all these things beforehand, so he was able to bring that life experience to his writing. And maybe I'm wrong because obviously I don't know any the majority of writers in Hollywood, but maybe it's a lot of them haven't lived a life. And yes, okay, they've been to film school and learned how to do scripts, but they haven't had the actual experience of life to mold that into the script. Am I just talking gibberish?
No, you're not. I think you're onto something. I think that, no matter what age you are, you can come up with a compelling, wonderful story. Um, but I do think that the more life you live, or even the more experiences you have, and young people can have really meaningful experiences, um, the more kind of fodder you have for your storytelling.
Mhm.
But you can have all the wonderful experiences in the world, But if you don't know how to write a sentence in a grammatical way, or if you don't know how to write realistic sounding dialogue, if you don't know how to get exposition into a story that doesn't feel like an exposition dump or an as you know Bob moment in the story, it's not going to come out well. And I think that there's absolutely a time and a place for training, whether it's film school or getting an MFA or taking a few workshops or joining a writers group with some people that you trust and have good things to say. And I don't mean like favorable things, I mean like useful things to say, like really good critical comments. And I think that I just want to get on the critical comments thing a little bit. I think one of the big problems that we have right now with writing is that our current batch of incoming writers don't get the critical feedback that they need. And um, I don't know, I don't know how to say this so it doesn't sound awkward, but I think a lot of times new writers, no matter what their age is, it doesn't like this is beyond age, but new writers who are going through a program very much are treated like they are a commodity for the school, and that the writers coming through the program have to be treated in a certain way so that they remain positive about the program and they feel good and acknowledged and empowered, but they don't always hear the things they need to hear in order to improve the stories that they want to tell. And so they come out of these programs in schools thinking that they are really good at what they're doing, but they haven't learned how to take criticism and turn it into stories that just dive really deep into the human experience and uncover those really painful truths about our life. They may have those things in their story, but they haven't quite figured out how to pull that out into the story that the audience can then consume. I don't know. That was a long, wordy answer. Sorry, Chris.
No, no, no need to apologise. I completely get it, and I think writing certainly is something that can improve, that can be, but not enough people are doing it. Although one group of people that are improving, and certainly in the 20th century, is internationally, especially South Korea. Their film scene has exploded. You got Japan, you
Great.
got films in
Yeah.
Europe. What is it that South Korea in particular are doing well that we're we're in the West aren't when it comes to movies and television?
Well, I think it's because they're willing to, I don't want to say they're willing to take chances because I think the US, even the UK, are willing to take chances as well. But, I think it's more of like they are willing to tell the truth. And whenever you go to like an MFA program or a writing retreat or any kind of instructive retreat where you get like a mentor who's like sharing their wisdom with you, the one thing you'll hear is like, the character needs to tell their truth. And I feel like that's something that doesn't happen that much anymore. We don't see a lot of those truths being told in American cinema because we have to hit certain things. We have to make sure that characters say things in a certain way or act in a certain way, or we've included a certain number of characters. And so the truth starts getting watered down. But when you are looking at like South Korean cinema or Italian cinema or whatever, some other country international film cinema, they still have that flexibility and freedom to explore the individual truths of each of their characters. And I know this isn't a South Korean example, but I would give the example of the recent movie Parthenope. And if you haven't seen it, it is a wild film and the plot is kind of all over the place. It's more of a metaphor than anything, but it is the most beautifully written and told story that I've seen in a long time. And it's all in Italian, except for this this one scene that's in English, and the thing is, you don't, the language doesn't matter. You still understand the story from what you see on the screen. And I think that's when you know you're getting to human truths, is when you can still understand the story beyond the language.
Yeah, I mean, South Korea, some of the stories they come up with just original. You think of old genres, but they deliver such original stories in it. It disappoints me, certainly in the US and even in the UK, where that hasn't been the case for too, like for the most part. And it's a shame no one's looking at that. And for example, like Godzilla minus one, for instance, was it less than 15
Oh
million it
my God.
was? And you think, no,
Godzilla minus one is like, I think, a perfect example of it could be in a language you don't know. I didn't even read the subtitles half the time because I could tell what story was being told. I could tell who the characters were and what their relationships were. I could tell what the characters were experiencing and feeling. Like we got into the truth of all of the characters in the film, of the time that it was that that film took place, of Godzilla himself. Like that was beautiful cinema, just beautiful cinema.
yeah, very much so. To the point where they could, I mean, the way the actors acted was so good, they could just have just mimed it and have no dialogue at all. And you would have known what the story is because everything else around it was so, so good.
Yes, exactly. There's another one called Perfect Days, and it's I think it took place in, was it Tokyo? I think the Tokyo is the city that it was in. Perfect Days. It is a beautiful story about a man. He's basically a janitor. He goes around the city toilets in Tokyo and cleans them. And it just is such an absurd and odd idea to write a story, a screenplay about that kind of character. But when you see the movie, you are struck by the things he experiences, the people he interacts with, the way he's treated, the people that he cares about. And the things that he values as a human being. And you get this insight into his life and what it means to really have a daily experience that isn't all glamour and glitz. It's just real and it's meaningful. And I don't know, I think international cinema does a wonderful job at getting into those types of stories, and that's what we are missing a lot of in the United States, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's still good films that come out, obviously, but yeah,
Hmm.
it does get frustrating quite a lot when I watch films. And I try not to be a critic of films because I imagine it's like a very hard thing to do. But then there's times where I watch and I think, oh, that's bad and this bad. Like I went to the cinema to watch a film the other day and I thought, yeah, soundtrack doesn't go with that scene and this writing could have been better. So in a way, I don't want to do that because I just want to go there and enjoy. But I think my brain's been so used to almost rubbish now, a cinema with commercial, I can't help but do it now, which is a very sad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Like it's hard when you choose to be a film critic. I think one of the things that you really do need to think about is there are different ways people approach it, and that you'll see a lot of these people like cinema's dead, or superhero movies are all crap, let's never watch them again, stop making them. That's not the For me, that's not what I think of when I think of film criticism or movie reviews. Those are also two different things. Film criticism is very different than a movie review for me, and I like to do movie reviews and just help people understand what's in a film and if it's something they may want to see. And so when I'm talking about a movie, a lot of the times, I might be saying really nice things about part of a movie that I absolutely hated, because I think that it's important to remember that not everybody likes the same kinds of movies. People look for different things in movies. And when you're talking about a film from a reviewer's point of view, your job is actually to tell people what the movie is about, what's in it, what it does well, the things they can expect from it, and then they can decide what they want to do, if they want to go see that movie or not. But film criticism is really when you get into what you were just talking about, like, why did they do it that way? They should have done it like this. And it's really easy to mix those two together. I do it a little more often than I should, I think.
Oh, cool. Well, to start more on a positive note regarding films and gauge a bit more of your personal interest with regards to film and TV. Because obviously, say you're writing a book now. So, who are your favorite authors? Like, who inspires you to write or inspired you to write when you were growing up?
All right, so there are way too many authors to name, but I will say Andy Weir is one of my favorite authors. I love science fiction, and his science fiction, while it's not always perfect science, it always feels like plausible science. And
Hmm.
when you're writing science fiction, I think that's really important to have plausible science where it could happen or under the right circumstances, it feels right and it feels real. Um, let's see, who else do I really, really like? He's one that really inspires me. There's another author, Adrian Tchaikovsky. He's in the UK, and I've talked about his work for a long time now. And I think more and more people are starting to get to know his work. But he also does great science fiction that includes good science, interesting things that you don't get in most science fiction, and he puts together in a really interesting way. Um, but there's so many different things. I love the Murderbot series. There's just so many series that I read way too much. There are too many authors that I love. I will talk to you about any book that you read. I will enjoy sharing book stories. So bring them on.
Cool. Same question regarding directors. Are there any directors you look at and think actually they could inspire your writing or just enjoy the work that they do?
Um, I actually don't like talking about directors because
Okay.
I mean, but I will. The thing is, I try not to think too much about who the director was or who the writer was before I see a movie because I want to judge the movie for what I see on the screen, not what I anticipate
Yeah.
will come. And I think one of those directors, like an example is James Gunn. I'm really looking forward to the Superman movie. I love Superman stories. I've always loved Superman as a character. I know James Gunn is directing this upcoming Superman movie because you simply can't get away from who's directing that movie.
Yeah.
And when you hear people talking about the new Superman, you inevitably hear about who the director is and then all the problems with the director or all the things that is great about the director, what the director's going to bring. And I'm like, I don't I don't really care. I just want to see the movie and judge the movie for what I see in front of me. Um, but but yeah, there are directors that I prefer, tend to prefer, I guess. But I I don't know. I think all the film critics are gonna like be like, Erin, what are you talking about? But no, I don't really care who the directors are. I think I care more about who the writers are than the director.
Okay, okay. Um, what are your hopes, it's kind of positive, what are your hopes for the future of film and TV in the United States?
My greatest hope is that we can get away from all of and I like, of course, I like seeing franchises and sequels and things like that, but I'd like to see fewer of them. I'd like
Mm,
to see more original stories, and I understand that there it's more of a chance to do an original story, but every great franchise was once an original story. So if they just think about that one truth, every great franchise was once original. The original John Wick, the original Indiana Jones, the original Star Wars. They were all chances that a studio took at one point. And I know there are more great stories out there, and we just need to find them.
Indeed. If people want to find your work, where can they go?
Right now, the best place to go is YouTube. That's where I post most of my videos. I do video reviews um, of movies, but I also do discussions and some conversations as well and interviews. And you can find me at Erin Underwood Presents on YouTube. I also have a Medium page where when I have time, I do post written versions of my reviews, but those are really the two easiest places to find me.
Cool. Erin, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. We've covered a lot in nearly an hour. And I know you're very busy. Sorry for this. So thank you so much for coming onto the 286 project.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a pleasure. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk, and it was so nice to meet you.
Likewise. Thank you very much.